Ever wondered on how you're supposed to structure your practice lesson to be the best for you? You've just been practicing for hours and you're just getting nowhere, or you just feel really disorganized in your sessions and you feel like you're not getting anywhere. Well, I've got a video for you where I'm going to show you how I structure my practice and how I make sure that I'm always moving forward and always enjoying my practice sessions, as after all, the journey that we go on through all of this music should be an enjoyable one, and if you're not enjoying your practice, you won't be getting anywhere. So let's get straight into it. So I like to start my practice sessions just by tuning up my bass, making sure that it's all in the best playing ability for me, and just getting myself into a nice, calm and relaxed space. If there's loads of noise and other stuff going around, I can't get in the headspace to practice. And I recommend a dedicated practice space where you can go and just chill and then get ready, get your bass tuned up, and then start your practice session. And you'll be much more focused when you're in it if you have that dedicated space and if you have that sense of calmness with your practice space. Then afterwards, I like to start just with a little tune that I already know, and since I'm a jazz man, I'll just start with a jazz standard that I've been working on recently that, you know, I just want to play again. And it's good actually, if you did the last thing in your practice session from your previous one, if you tag it into the start of your next one, you can see your progress different. So if I was working on, let's say, Recorder Me in my last practice session and the melody on that, I'll start my practice session with that exact same thing and see how far I've gone. Often if I'm practicing late at night, and you know, a lot of you probably will as well, when I come onto it the next day, I've got way more progress done, and all I've done is sleep on it, and that is a good thing. I think between practice sessions, it's good to have sleep and have a sleep session between. So practice at one point every day. Two sort of doesn't really do much. If you've got the time and you want to practice, or you need to get some things done, then by all means practice for longer. But if you try and keep it into one session and then sleep between sessions, it will play much better, I think, and gaining your progress further along the way, as sleeping in between sessions really just locks it in for me, and I make so much more progress the next day when I get into it. So after you've done the thing that either you've been working on in your last practice session near the end of it, or just a tune that you know, it's always good to start with just something that you're really familiar with, and it makes you feel good about what you're playing. It makes you feel comfortable about what you're playing, and that's the space you want to get into when you start practicing. Then in that sort of mid-section, you've got to think to yourself, what is something that I want to learn, or you know, want to do going forward? What's something that's perhaps a little bit challenging? And find whatever tune or music that is for you. For me, it will just be, I'm just going to learn another jazz standard. What have I been listening to recently? It's great to listen in between practice sessions and get inspiration for stuff you want to learn, and then you can either find the sheet music online or work it out by ear. That's a good thing. This middle ground in this practice session should be about doing something new and something exciting, or something that you've been recently working on as well, because you know, with challenges, it can take several practice sessions to get where you want to go. So it's good to work on this new thing or something new every practice session. But it is good to get the grounding sort of by the end of it. It's like, right, I've got all of what I wanted down today, and then I can continue that on. I find if you don't get a sense of just, okay, I've actually achieved something in this practice session, in this sort of learning something new time, you often feel not great after the practice session is finished. So if there's a really difficult tune which you want to learn, then why not just learn the first 4 bars of it? And you know, you don't have to do it at the original tempo, or do all of it at a slower tempo and just get it under your fingers. And it's good to play along with these backing tracks as well, or just the original tune if you want that as well. I feel like you can cut these difficult things up into sections, as it should be challenging for you to progress further on. But sometimes you're just going to work on something that isn't particularly challenging, but you just want to play it because it sounds good. And that's another element in learning new things and listening to stuff. If you listen to things when you're not practicing, you can be like, oh, I like that, I'm gonna put that in the back of my mind. Next time I pick up my instrument, I'm gonna play that. And often you're gonna have so much more of an enjoyable time If you're listening to tunes, you're like, I'm really liking this tune, and then you play it, it just feels absolutely amazing when you do, and you're learning new material, which is great. But you could expand this out into just, I'm going to learn one new tune a week. It doesn't have to be every practice session I'm going to do something new. But I do think you have to do something slightly challenging, or perhaps something you're working on, or again, a new thing in that mid section of your practice session. So you've done something in the beginning, which is just all nice and chill and easy and what you know well, or it could be challenging, but you still know it well if you're more advanced, and then get into something which you don't know, some unfamiliar territory, and have a go with that. Because I often find once you work through it and you're over that hurdle and you've learnt it, or it's a great tune you've been listening to and you love the process of learning it and playing it, and you want to play it so badly that you put all that time and you put all that effort in, the reward is so much better in the long run, and you're going to feel a lot more progress. If you just keep working on the same stuff over and over and over again, it can get really boring, and also you're not really progressing, you're just practicing the same thing over and over again. We need to get our fingers doing different things, so we need to keep doing new things. It keeps our brains happy, and it keeps us happy, and most importantly, it keeps you improving as a musician. As a thing that we don't want to do is really not improve. And you can feel this after breaks like holidays and things like that. It is totally fine to sort of go back a step, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, as ultimately we want our general trend of performance and practice to be upwards. We want to get better over time, but some days we will just play worse than other days, and some days we'll be playing better than other days. At times we'll be accelerating in growth much faster, in times we'll be sort of plateauing in growth, in some ways in improvement, and it's totally fine and normal to have all of this, and you sort of just have to accept it and enjoy the process. You're like, oh, I'm not playing as great today. Well, you can probably practice for a little bit less of a time, but play something that you really like and really enjoy a bit more, and perhaps spend a little bit less time on the something new. Don't push yourself and just like sort of make yourself annoyed with how badly you're playing today. If you feel that way, I think you should just work on something that just makes you feel good on those days, and you'll feel much better when you get to one of those good days, and then you can put a heck of a lot of progress in then. As we don't want to be pushing ourselves and going so far, pushing ourselves too far I should say. We do want to be pushing ourselves, but not to the extent where essentially we get worse to some extent. There's this curve with the practice session that you get better as you get into it, and then you reach the top, and then you slowly start getting worse at something. And this is definitely the stage where you could over practice in a way, and over practicing isn't necessarily bad, but when you get to the point where you've been playing this thing for ages and you're still not quite getting it, and now you're getting it just sort of not as good every single time, just stop. Just put the bass down and end the practice session. Just be like, right, I'll come to it in the morning. It is really up to you when you need to decide, okay, right, this isn't working today. Just have a break, have a chill. Don't push yourself too far, because you're really just not going to enjoy it, and then come back to it with a fresh mind, and you'll often find that you can get it pretty much straight away. So then you've got through your new thing, and you've done your new thing, or you either decide, oh, I'm going to stop now because I'm getting worse at this new thing. Now I've reached that curve of where I need to just stop and leave it alone, or you've reached the stage where you're like, right, I've learned that now. That's great. Should I end my practice session here? And well, definitely you could. I think there's a nice last thing that you can do to your practice session to really make you feel more satisfied. And that's, again, sort of do what you did at the beginning, perhaps with a different tune, not the exact same one, but go back to something familiar and something that you know, and just play it to finish, and you'll feel so much more satisfied at the end of your practice session. Because if it's something you know, and you know really well, and it's just such a great piece of music for you, then you're going to enjoy playing it. And then when you play at the end of your practice session, no matter how you felt about that middle segment, you're going to end leaving and feeling much more satisfied with your practice. And then from there, you're like, okay, right, I'm progressing and I'm feeling so much better about my playing. Again, you want to end your practice sessions feeling satisfied, or at least you know, right, I'm going to leave it, I need the space. You've got to accept it when you need the space, but I always try and end my practice sessions satisfied with what I've done, as I don't want to feel down about what I've been practicing and, you know, potentially how well I might or might have not done, because ultimately we have good days and bad days. Like I've said, everyone goes through it. You're not the only one, and everyone had to start from the beginning someday. So if you're looking up to all these people and just like, I'll never be as good as them, just stop with that mentality and just think, right, how do I get as good as them? And what do I need to do to progress myself? As ultimately, you are your greatest critic and your greatest teacher as well. While you can seek information from loads of other sources like other bass players and videos from myself or other bass channels on YouTube, ultimately you've got to apply and understand those mechanics and improvements that you want to do yourself, and then from that is how you get better, because ultimately you teach yourself. While other teachers can get you there faster, and that's what I'm here to do, is to speed up your process and give you some guidance, it's ultimately you which have to build the habits and then do this over time. You're not going to become the most fantastic bass player overnight, and the hard truth is you simply have to put the time in to become a great bass player. But if you structure your practice lesson in this simple 3-step way of just before it starts, get yourself in a space and get your bass tuned, get it set up so you're playing the best before you even play a note, get it set up so it all sounds great, and then start with something familiar, go through it and really enjoy that piece of music. Then if you've been listening to stuff, which I always recommend you do when you're not practicing and you're just doing nothing, do some listening, because it makes you better as well. And then from your listening, you engage in that musical language, and then from that you can apply that into your practice session via tunes that you might want to learn, and then you can transcribe some things out by ear as well. I will be doing a video on transcribing at some point if you want it, so comment below if that is something you're interested in, and then, you know, go through that phase and then end with something that really satisfies you, and then boom, you've got this perfect formula where you start and you're focused and you enjoy the start of your practice session, you get some good progress done in that middle section, and then, you know, you end with something great as well, and you are left feeling satisfied with your practice. Again, structure this with really as much time as you have. So let's say if you've got 10 minutes, then do the first 2.5 playing something you like, then do the next 5 doing the sort of really practical stuff and the new stuff, and then the last 2.5 minutes doing whatever tune this is that you want to do and that you like at the end to make yourself feel satisfied. But if it's a 4-hour practice session, obviously you're not going to spend 1 hour doing a tune you like at the start and 1 hour tune that you like at the end. So you've got to judge it, but just 1 tune at the start, 1 tune at the end, really, and then whatever time you have in the middle, do that. You're going to have different amounts of practice times each day, and I know a lot of you have limited practice time, and that can really be an issue, but ultimately you have to structure it in a way that relates to your practice time in a good way, and, you know, becomes doable with the amount of time you have each day to practice, as practicing daily is ultimately the route to the most success, as you're going to keep going on that progression. You won't really have those backwards curves which you might not want, but, you know, ultimately stuff gets in the way, holidays get in the way of your practice. So, you know, it's fine. You don't have to play every day. You don't have to be so strict and so religious with it. But if you have the time in your day, then please do. We don't have the issues like with other horn instruments where we're really loud. We can practice at whatever time we like, because bass is one of the quietest instruments. We're not amplified. We're all good on that front. So you can practice whenever you want, and we're really lucky in that way. And you can just put headphones in or an earbud in and get your tunes up, get your music up, and whatever you need to get your ideal practice session. So have you ever had that moment where you've needed to take a bass solo and you have no idea how to begin it, and then once you're getting to the end of your bass solo, you have no idea how to end it, and then also you sort of have no idea of what you're supposed to do in the middle as well? Well, essentially, once you've learned what notes you need to be playing in a bass solo, once you've learned your chord tones, essentially, if you don't, go watch the video I've got over there. They're probably over there, to be honest. So once you've learned your chord tones, this is the video that I want for you. Even if you haven't learned the chord tones though, it's still a useful one. And it's how you're supposed to structure a bass solo. So let's get into it. Now, you want to start with something that is sort of big and melodic. I'd say play off the melody. It's great if you know the melody to the tune that you're playing. If you're doing a bass solo, and simply quote the melody perhaps at the beginning as well, and that really works effectively. Essentially, you want something that's melodic and works well, very well within the chord changes, or is either quite grand and quite complex in a way you can do as well. But often starting simple is good. For bebop, you might want to start with something that's perhaps a little bit more complex and all over the place. But you know, you can always start simple, and starting simple is often the best. If you start with a nice melodic rhythmic idea, it's often a great way of starting off a bass solo. Then when you get into the middle, there's not really too much apart from sort of follow the chord changes and, you know, play along with the chord changes. But one thing which I think is very, very important in this middle section is driving the music on in some sense, because you are the bass player. You're sort of supposed to be the meat and potatoes, I guess, to the music you want to say. And if you can sort of drive the piece on a bit, you don't have to, but if you can drive it on with your solo as well, and perhaps not have too much space in a bass solo. Space is great for any solo, but usually if I'm soloing on bass compared to on a horn, I'll try and leave a little bit less space, and it's usually because it's a little bit more open. But space is always welcome. I just don't tend to leave really big and long gaps. It's partly how you want to play it as well. If you want to leave long gaps, but I'd say fill it with a lot of material, but make sure it's good material. And another way of doing that is developing good ideas in this section of the solo, essentially. So if you find an idea which sounds great, then play it again, and then play it again, and play it again. And this might be over different chord changes, so you need to move it around the neck, transpose it, whatever, or you can just do stuff chromatically as well, or just do the exact same thing again if you notice that it works over the same chord as the next bar, or if you know it's got the exact same chord on the next bar as the bar you're playing. Developing those rhythmic ideas and melodic ideas works key in this part of a solo, I think, where you can start melodically and simply, and often it's great to start melodically for a bass solo, and that's how I think I usually like to structure the bass solos. If I don't know the melody though at the beginning, always start with some good chord tones as well, but in that middle section, developing some rhythmic ideas and going through and playing over the chord changes and sort of driving the piece on are my main factors in that midsection of a bass solo and how I want to structure it. I won't leave too much space, but you definitely can. I'll play less melodically than I did at the beginning. I want the beginning to be a bit simpler. Let's say I get into it a little bit more in these midsections. I prefer the beginning to be a lot more melodic and simple, whereas you'll get a lot of like sort of quicker chord tone based stuff, at least in the midsections of my bass solos. At least that's how I like to do them. But then it does come time to end a bass solo. Now, by the time you're getting to end a bass solo, you've got to think to yourself, you want to sort of end as you would at the start, like what you did at the start. It's sort of like, you know, when you get a book that just closes itself up right at the last moment, links itself back to the beginning even. That is a great thing you can do. Or go back to the melody again. Often if you start with the melody and end with the melody, it's great. And this is actually a tip which I think you should really listen to. It's probably the top tip of the video. If you're playing with people that you haven't played before on a gig or something like that, often if you play the melody at the end of your solo, it signals, hey, that's the end of my solo, and you don't even need to say anything. And often it's like, oh yeah, the bass solo is now ended. Especially if you do it right at the end of the form, in like the last 4 bars, last 2 bars of the form or something, and then you quote the melody right at the end, it's like, okay, yeah, the bass solo is ended. If you do it right in the middle of the form, it's not going to be like, okay, the bass solo is ended there. But if you do it right at the end, often quoting the melody at the end marks a great finish and works melodically as well, and people generally like if you finish with the melody. You don't have to, and I can't say I always finish going back to the melody, but if I know the melody of the tune, which most of the times I do, especially if it's tunes that I'm playing with my jazz trio. On some other occasions when I'm at other playing things, I don't know all the tunes because other people are calling the tunes and I've just got to play the changes, then I don't know the melodies there, but I'll try and pick it up by ear as well. If you've got a good ear for these things, listen to the melody as well, and you can even quote it in your solos even if you don't know the melody, or you can work it out from the chord changes and, you know, use your ear for some judgment as well. That's a great thing you can do, although perhaps a little more advanced. If you're more on the basic side of things, you don't have to do any of that. But if you think, start melodically, then have your develop rhythmic ideas and perhaps be less melodic in the middle. You can be melodic all throughout really, but generally you're less melodic in the middle, and you drive it on a little bit more and you develop those rhythmic ideas. And it could be anything. It could be any basic scale idea or anything, and you'll see that in my solo example, which I'm going to give in a bit, and then end melodically or even end with the melody in a best case scenario for sort of a air quotes perfect bass solo. But you don't have to do this every time. It's just a great three sort of part way of structuring a bass solo, which will work every time. It's always good to vary things, and when you don't know the melody, then you can just play melodically around the chord changes. Of course, it's great to know the chord changes or have the chord changes in front of you when you're doing a bass solo. You usually do, especially if you're playing somewhere, but if you already know the tunes, then it's great. You already have a lot more of a higher ground. And if this is your first time, do it with a tune you know and you already know the melody of, and you'll find it a lot easier to start developing those ideas and get a good sounding bass solo. But as always, it all takes practice. You've got to know your chord tones. I'll leave that video up again. If I haven't already linked it, it'll be there or there, depending on which way this camera goes nearing the end of the video. And that's all I've got, but I'm going to show you a playing example of my solo, and you know, it will sort of sum up everything I've said in this video into one neat solo. See if you can guess the jazz standard. Put it in the comments as well, because I'm not going to tell you. But yeah, that's it for the video. Hope you enjoyed the bass solo and now feel more energized, and you feel like you've got a structure for your next bass solo, and you feel like, okay, I sort of know what I'm going to be doing for the next one. As at the start, it can just feel like, oh my god, there's so much, what do I do? So I hope this has cleared it up with the structure. Again, if you don't know your chord tones, learn your chord tones. I'll probably put it in the description, but otherwise just go to one of the cards in the video and you'll see the chord tones video there, as it is very, very useful in my opinion. And that's it for today. Thanks for 100 subscribers, because it has been nice to reach that milestone, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.